As you sleep, you dream. But this dream is not like any other you've had. There is a sense of dread, foreboding. You're aware that what you're dreaming is real. Cities burning, your loved ones turned to corpses, their skin like dead leaves. You see a tree heavy with fruit. A hand reaches out and plucks a fruit off the tree. You watch as the hand drains the fruit of life, leaving only a smoldering, desiccated husk. All life gone. It's a fantasy world, right? And that means it should have in it the things we expect a fantasy world to have. And among many other things, I think that means there should be visions, oracles, dreams that portend something. Certainly here in the real world, ancient cultures seem to have taken seriously the idea that it was possible to know the future. The Oracle at Delphi is one notable example. And in the fiction that inspires our fantasy, we have Glorfindel, who made the oracular prediction that there was no point going after the Witch King of Angmar because not by the hand of man shall he fall. Frodo had dreams of the present, in which he saw Gandalf pacing atop the Tower of Orthanc, and this was something Tolkien took very seriously. He painstakingly mapped out exactly how long it would take Gandalf to get to Orthanc, and then he had to shuffle the plot with the hobbits around so that Frodo's dream would occur on exactly the right night. Faramir is regularly contacted by God, who has chosen him to join the Fellowship, but because Faramir fails to correctly interpret his dreams, God gets fed up and sends Boromir. Paul Atreides has oracular vision and is the subject of a prophecy, so you get a 2-for-1 deal with him. He is both the prophet and the prophecy. So the foundational fiction we read, including Foundation, which makes its oracle a scientist, but no less the oracle in spite of this. The fiction that inspires us often has oracles, portentous dreams, and prophecies. Does your campaign have these? Why not? Well, one reason might be because they are basically a recipe for disaster. But if your campaign isn't regularly teetering on the edge of disaster, are you even really a DM? The first version of OD&D, which was D&D with Matt O'Driscoll, right? His nickname is OD, so it's OD and D. That failed for a bunch of reasons. Not only did I give the players no reason to explore the dungeon they found, I gave them good reasons not to do it. But even after that, something happened that completely derailed the game. This was the first time I'd ever played D&D with my friend Jason. It was his first time playing any tabletop RPG of any kind, and he made a warlock. Jason turned out to be a total natural. Killer role player, immediately got into character and started improvising a shared backstory with OD where they were basically two con men like Bob Hope and Bing Crosby in a road movie. Kevin Kline and Kenneth Branagh in Road to El Dorado. You get it. Well, I had this idea for a subplot about a dying oracle who passes their visionary power onto someone else, and Jason's warlock was the only member of the team who was actively curious about the oracle. So curious, in fact, she turned him into a horny toad.
They loved him up and turned him into a horny toad.
So she picked him. I didn't realize this was going to destroy the adventure, but it did. The oracle died and her hourglass eyes went back to normal, just as Jason's character's eyes became hourglass shaped. The players didn't understand what had happened. I didn't explain it. I thought part of the fun would be discovering that Jason's character was the new oracle. Jason's character had no idea what had just happened. Why should Jason? Well, maybe because it would have saved the campaign. Maybe not. Folks say hindsight is 20/20, but in my experience, it's closer to 50-50. The players are supposed to escort some merchants through the dark forest, and on the way, they discover a dungeon. Now, that was bad design on my part. You know, the merchant caravan isn't going to go into suspended animation while they're dungeon crawling. At one point, and this is within like an hour of Jason becoming the oracle, one player asked, well, what happens if we don't explore this dungeon? And I thought, hey, this is a good opportunity to show off Jason's new powers. So Jason has a vision of the city of Dalrath burning and these snakes writhing ominously over the fire. So what happens if we don't go into the dungeon? Well, the world ends is the implication, even if only locally, maybe. At least that was my intent. But that wasn't the player's interpretation. They didn't even realize the question and the vision were connected. That is something I screwed up. I could have made it obvious this vision was in response to their question. That would have been smart. Jason describes his vision, and the players decide it means the city is on fire right now, and they need to hurry and go save it. And at this point, I was well and truly boned. I made Jason the Oracle without telling him or even hinting at what was happening. I gave him a vision as an answer to a question without ever telling anyone those two things were related. I did no work, in other words, to make this subplot work. But hey, I also did no work to make exploring a dungeon a reasonable option. So far, this sounds like prophetic visions are a bad idea, and it is at this point that you expect that I will explain all the times that it worked and how to do it right. Nope. It has never worked for me. This is not that kind of running the game video. This is more learn from my mistakes. And also, I hope, the start of a larger conversation where you tell the rest of us how you have used visions and prophecies well. I would love to hear that. I am always making mistakes as a DM for a couple of reasons. First, I am human, but also it's easy to get overwhelmed when you're sitting behind the screen. So while I did learn from my mistakes, I also have it in me to make a lot of those mistakes again. But mostly I screw up because I am always pushing myself to try new stuff. I had never made a character an oracle before. I had never deployed prophetic visions before. I was interested in trying it because I had never done it before. Sometimes I like running very challenging campaigns like the Chain of Acheron. Sometimes I like running simple, straightforward games like Dusk. I thought OD&D was going to be simple, like Dusk. And let me tell you folks, that is the main reason everything went to shit, because I didn't treat it seriously. I thought, oh, I'll throw something together and it'll just work. I'm Matt Colville. I can do anything. Well, one, no. And two, also, no. I threw together a bunch of ideas and I just assumed it would work, and I ended up oversimplifying my simple adventure. We had a mission to get the caravan through the forest, and that should have been enough, but I added a dungeon. For no obvious reason. If the players were trying to get through the forest alone and there was no time limit, then a dungeon makes total sense. But they weren't alone and there was a kind of time limit, so a dungeon makes no sense in this context. So of course I threw in a complex subplot with oracular visions, which I never explained. To no one's surprise, except my own, this completely fell apart. Okay, that's what happened, but how would I fix it? Well, when it comes to the dungeon and the caravan, if you want to know how I would fix it, you can just watch Dusk. Dusk is literally that adventure from OD&D Take 2, and it's going incredibly well. So the moral of that story is, even if you just want to run something simple and fun, you still need to do a minimum of prep, or at least thought, which I did not do. Dusk wasn't hard to throw together, it was easy and fun, it's just a better designed adventure because I took it more seriously. But the subject of this video is oracles, dreams, and visions, and I do think that can work even though I screwed it up. But it comes with a caveat. If I had told Jason what was going on, made him less of a victim of my subplot and more of a co-conspirator, that would have helped a lot. In fact, I think that basically would have solved the problem. But I think we also needed a link between the question and the vision, because I don't think players are in control of their visions. I think they can and should come unbidden to their minds. Some questions get visions, some don't. This means it's up to me to make it clear when a vision is in response to a question. So make Jason part of the subplot. That solves most problems. Then let everyone know that this vision is in response to this question. That solves the other problems. Except the one problem it doesn't solve is the players have no idea what the vision means, and this is something I'm sticking with. To me, the reason visions of the future are interesting is because this is the kind of thing that happens in fantasy. Yes, it can be disruptive. That's sort of the point. Oracular visions are only supposed to make sense in hindsight. The players should learn not to trust visions. But also, once a vision pays off, it can, I think, be hugely rewarding. I could be wrong. This has never worked for me, but also I've only tried it once or twice. In the real world, the future is uncertain and undetermined, and it is what we make it. There is no destiny, no fate. There's no guarantee things will turn out okay. There are no supernatural forces working to make things turn out okay. But part of running a fantasy game is, it's a fantasy. You can make a world that operates under more dramatically satisfying rules. As the DM, you know what the future holds for the PCs because you've read the adventure. This is a luxury none of us in the real world have. So you can read ahead and build visions that describe the world if the heroes succeed, and visions showing the world if they fail. Then resolving the vision becomes part of the reward. It's a way of saying the cosmos approves. So that's one reason to deploy oracular visions. Fulfilling them feels rewarding, as finally the vision makes sense. But I also like the idea that if the players are clever, they could figure out the vision. As an example, I invented a vision, the one from the start of the video. Jerry, could we play that again? As you sleep, you dream. But this dream is not like any other you've had. There is a sense of dread, foreboding. You're aware that what you're dreaming is real. Cities burning, your loved ones turned to corpses, their skin like dead leaves. You see a tree heavy with fruit. A hand reaches out and plucks a fruit off the tree. You watch as the hand drains the fruit of life, leaving only a smoldering, desiccated husk. All life gone. Yeah, that's a good vision. And it has some classic Matt Colville nonsense in it because for me, the players need to be curious about some things in order to make progress. This is how dreams and visions can be like puzzles. Because if the players just accept the vision and do not inquire further, well, then they can't make progress. It's just this weird thing that happened to them. But if they are curious, they may learn something. Hey, that hand I saw in my dream, did I get a good look at it? Yeah, a pretty good look. What did it look like? Well, it was pale, thin. Oh, like a zombie hand. Yeah, or like a lich's hand. Oh, shit, did I notice anything else? Well, yeah, you notice it does have 6 fingers. What? Now, for some players, that alone would be a huge clue regarding the end boss of the campaign, but most players would just think of the Princess Bride, so they'd run around looking for a 6-fingered man. But armed with this knowledge, the players might start to inquire, and if they find a sage, someone who knows the deep lore of the world, they would discover that in some obscure tomes, there is a figure, a legendary figure as powerful as they are evil, who is sometimes described as having 6-fingered hands. Vecna. That is how a dream or an oracular vision can be a clue, but it should not be obvious. It should require the players be curious, investigate a little. Yes, it should be possible the players will misinterpret the vision. It's part of the fun, but it can work. And when it does work, I think it can be narratively satisfying. So for me, a vision is something vague but evocative with details players might not think to investigate. But that investigation can lead to clues. That is a big part of my style as a DM. I describe important stuff, but I leave out the thing that makes it important, like the goblins carrying a standard. If the players are curious and ask what kind of standard, then I describe the symbol of the Twilight Celestials. If the players aren't curious, well, then they miss out. My friend Jim used an oracle to great effect in his legendary Albion campaign, and since then, every campaign I've run in Vasloria has included a Tower of the Oracle. But alas, my players have never been curious about it. Jim used his oracle to sort of give us vague clues, letting us know we were on the right path without doing all the work for us. You know, a vision needs to be symbolic. It can't be something like, in 10 days, 1,000 elves march on the tower. That's not an oracular vision. That's more like a prophecy. And even then, prophecies are often oblique and impenetrable until they've been fulfilled. Justice Armand's character in Dusk, Ko, has had a vision. Not because he's a full-time oracle like Jason's character, but because Ko is one of the Barrow Men, and they get a vision of their own death. Justice's character, Ko, is literally on a vision quest, a quest to determine the meaning of his vision. And so far, no problems. He doesn't know what the vision means, but he knows he doesn't know, and he knows he needs to find someone to interpret his vision. For me, the fun of visions is that they are not obvious. They may never be obvious until after the fact. Ko knows he needs to find a sage, and when he does, that sage will ask him the questions Justice hasn't asked. And the answers, which Ko remembers, but Justice does not, will lead to the next step in the vision quest. So one day, I don't know when, but one day the players in some game of mine, maybe The Chain, maybe Dusk, maybe some other game, will find an ancient tome of elven prophecies. And this tome will describe in exacting detail all the stuff the players have already done. An ancient tome written thousands, even tens of thousands of years ago that exactly describes what the players have done so far, and it will refer to them in archetypal terms. It won't be Levelis the Wood Elf Invoker, it'll refer to the Flame of the Sun, because she calls on a flaming solar spirit in combat. It won't refer to Sir Vanazor, the Dragonborn Knight. It will say the scales of the just, because he's covered in scales and he dispenses justice. Then I can include some suitably vague but evocative nonsense about the future of the game. Stuff I know because I'm the DM. Remember, I know what is going to happen, more or less, but I do not know how or exactly why. That's where the players come in. Maybe the Codex Sanguis Silva, the Book of the Blood Woad, describes a future in which the sun cracks. Yeah, that's suitably prophetic, oracular. What does it mean? Only way to find out is keep playing. Thanks for watching, folks. I feel certain that even if you don't use oracles, prophecies, and visions in your game, this video will get the wheels spinning in some other direction. And at the end of the day, That's what these videos are all about. If you liked this video and you want to support the channel, you really should check out our Patreon. For only $5 a month, you get Arcadia. We just had some amazing rules in Arcadia 8 for harvesting monster bits and using them like super spell components. 20 pages of rules for what happens if you cast Dark Vision using the eye of an Ettercap. How about Lightning Bolt, but with Kraken Blood as the spell component? Spoilers, it's way cooler. We also have an adventure that lets you start at 0 level, but each player is running like an entire party of pre-heroic nincompoops, and they die really easily, and whichever one survives the adventure, that's your character. Congratulations, you get a name and a class and your first level. I think it is an incredibly memorable way to start a campaign, and you end up with a hero who remembers how you used to be a farmer, and then a troll started eating people, and you and like 15 other townspeople went to deal with it, and only you and like 3 others survived. You remember it because you actually did it. It is frankly amazing and exactly the kind of stuff I want and look forward to using in my game. And for $5, $7 on our store, it is a steal. In fact, I think now that Arcadia is getting close to 50 pages per issue, including maps and charts and full color illustrations, I think we're going to have to raise the price. I think it's going to go to $10 on Patreon. But folks who pledged at the $5 level will be grandfathered in. So get in while the getting's good. Thanks for watching, everybody. Next episode, I think, is episode number 100, depending on how you count it. And we're not planning on any kind of like big celebration, but I think it would be fun to go back and look at some of my earlier advice, including some advice to new DMs that you may never have heard, and see whether or not I still agree with it. Until then, peace out.